Now, the critical question, as always, was what would the United States do? There was an internal bureaucratic battle in the Nixon administration. The Secretary of the State Department, William Rogers, wanted to continue with what had been U.S. policy. So no expansion, withdraw to the international border. And that would mean accept President Sadat's offer and have security. Henry Kissinger objected. He was National Security Advisor. His position, as he described it, was a stalemate, meaning no negotiations, just force. Okay, not unusual for Mr. Kissinger. And he won out in the bureaucratic battle, and the United States backed off its traditional position since '67 and left the world. And it's been out of the world since then on this issue. That was critical. Israel made a really fateful decision, preferring expansion to peace and security with U.S. backing. That meant that Israel is completely reliant on the United States, really for survival. It's going to be in a position of military confrontation and so on. It's got to have a powerful foreign backer, and the United States is it. So what happened from then on was more or less set in February 1971. Now, the President Sadat of Egypt kept warning that if the United States and Israel don't accept peace, he's going to go to war. They were laughing at him, basically. It was a period of extreme racism, both in Israel and the United States, mockery of Arabs. How could they fight a war? They didn't know which end of the gun to hold, and so on. Well, Sadat went to war, and Israel was practically destroyed. It came very close. It even came close to a nuclear war, because they apparently armed their nuclear warheads, and the U.S. declared a nuclear alert, so it was no joke. Okay, that finally was settled, but then the clouds lifted. It became clear to Israeli leaders and Kissinger that Egypt can't be dismissed as a basket case. They're going to have to negotiate with it. And then started a series of negotiations. I won't run through them. They ended up at Camp David in 1978 and 79. And what actually happened in Camp David is the United States and Israel accepted the offer by Sadat that they had rejected in 1971. Now, in U.S. diplomatic history, that goes down as a great diplomatic triumph of the United States. Carter's great triumph. That was a diplomatic catastrophe. They accepted an offer that they had rejected 8 years earlier. The result was a major war with huge losses and suffering, almost a nuclear war, and they finally accepted the offer. It's not exactly a diplomatic triumph, but it's the way it's interpreted in powerful states with obedient intellectuals like us. Well, meanwhile, in those years, something else had happened. The Palestinian issue, which had been sidelined before, was not there, entered the international agenda for various reasons. And it entered it very explicitly in January 1976. In January 1976, the major Arab states, all the relevant ones, brought a resolution to the Security Council of the United Nations calling for a two-state settlement. That's what the Arab League recently reiterated and what the rest of the world agrees to. Well, that didn't get very far. The United States vetoed it. Now, that happens all the time, but when the United States vetoes a resolution, it's a double veto. And first of all, it doesn't happen, and then it's wiped out of history. So again, you have to look hard to find the record of that, but it's there. Like, the same thing happened in 1980 under Carter. At that point, the Security Council was sort of dismissed. The U.S. wasn't going to let anything happen there. The issue shifted over to the General Assembly, where there is actually a veto, but technically there isn't. A U.S. vote against a resolution amounts to a veto. And there were almost annual resolutions at the General Assembly kind of reiterating the call for Palestinian national rights the votes were pretty uniform. 150 to 2, United States and Israel. Sometimes the United States picked up Dominica, Marshall Islands or somebody. But that was the record right through the General Assembly meeting, General Assembly sessions, and it goes right up till today. Obama and Kerry have just reiterated in their indirect and deceitful way. Now, actually, it's very important to recognize that in this record of over 30 years of blocking a diplomatic settlement, there was one exception, a very crucial one. In the last month of Clinton's term, he modified his rejectionist position. In December 2000, he presented what he called his parameters for a settlement. They were kind of vague, but they tolerated the international consensus as a part. He then made an important speech in which he said both sides have accepted the parameters, but both sides have presented reservations. They then met in Taba, Egypt, a week of negotiations, and the two sides came pretty close to a resolution, which was not very far from the international consensus, a pretty detailed resolution on all issues. And in fact, in their final press conference, they said if they had a few more days, they probably could have solved the problem. Well, they didn't have a few more days. Prime Minister Barak of Israel canceled the negotiations prematurely, and that came to an end. But that's important. Things have happened since 2001, but not anything fundamental with regard to a settlement. And what it tells us is that if a U.S. president were just willing to tolerate a settlement, it could very likely be reached, just as it almost was reached then. Well, that's out of history too. Again, wrong story, but it's there. Well, these are the kinds of things that John Kerry omitted when he talked about our failed efforts to be an honest broker since the three no's of 1967. And they're pretty critical, and again, he's an intelligent person, and if he can omit this, it tells us something. He also, like Obama, he brought up the Arab League proposal, but omitted its central component. So that tells us quite a lot. I should add that this is not just words. I mean, it's not just that the U.S. and Israel block the settlement in words. Much more importantly, they block it in deeds, and that's what's actually happening on the ground. If you were here last night, you saw Rita put up a map on the screen back there, which described what the U.S. and Israel have been doing in the West Bank. And what they've been doing is a very planned and systematic project, continuing right now, of undermining the possibility of a two-state settlement. So it's okay, it's one thing to veto diplomacy in words, but it's more important to act in a way to undermine the possibility of realizing it. And that goes on constantly. And it's not secret.